You're good.
All right, well, thank you everyone so much for joining us. My name is Ashley Stadler-Blank. I am an assistant professor of marketing at Xavier University in Cincinnati, and it's a pleasure to be moderating this panel called the Angry Hiring Manager panel. So I have some prepared questions. Please feel free to submit your own questions as well, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. Before we get started today, I do want to make a very important disclaimer that all of the opinions of our panelists are their own and do not reflect those of their employer. So to get started, I'd love for each panelist to introduce themselves. So let's go, Lizzy, John, and Ravi.
Thanks, Ashley. Good to talk with you all today. I'm Lizzy Foo Kune. I'm currently a senior director analyst at Gartner and have been for about the past 4 years. Prior to that, I spent 10 years building and managing analytics capabilities for marketing and advertising agencies.
I'm John Hogue. I'm a senior manager of a data science team at General Mills, where I've been for about 6.5 years, and have a lot to share, hopefully, today.
Hi, folks. Ravi Shanbhag. I lead strategy planning for our government operations, which is our at United Health Group, which is our Medicare and Medicaid businesses, is the operations side of things. I can't say that any one of us looks particularly angry here. So I'm happy, but I'm very, very, very glad to be here. So on this beautiful Monday. So hopefully it'll be a good conversation.
We'll see if any of the topics I pick can get you guys a little hot. So to start things off, we're going to talk about hiring today. And I think a good place to start is, what are the different career tracks that data scientists can get into?
I guess I can start off that. So I would say that it all depends on kind of the maturity of the organization that you're in and kind of how far along they are in this journey of becoming more data driven. From what I've seen at General Mills, now we have a variety of different things that are kind of tangentially related, and then we have like the data science team. So we have the data science team, which is doing a little bit of everything: programming, stats, machine learning, a lot of business acumen there. But on the sides, we've got data engineering, which is basically ensuring that our data can arrive to the location on time, accurately, and reliably. We've also got a new function area that's called analytic data engineering, which is basically application specific, and it's kind of a really great partner role for our data scientists, where it's like maybe the data science team proved out a certain way to do a certain transformation that with the data to help them achieve better results. But now we need to do this like at scale, or we need to do this in a way that's not going to bring down the entire system. So we've got these analytic data engineers that can kind of help us out with application specific things. We also have a lot of roles around like reporting, which kind of play some tangential roles within data science. We also have process automation. A lot of data science is all about efficiency. So within process automation, they're solely focused on how do we do things more efficiently, or I think the phrase that they use is taking the robot out of the human. So there's a lot of different data related roles that all kind of build some key skill sets that might feed into some data science roles. So those are just some things that are out there that I'm seeing.
Anyone else want to add to that?
Sure. From a marketing and a data and analytics perspective, I think that data science is a lot more consultative than it might be in other professions. So not only is the data scientist on the hook for figuring out what the outputs of their models mean, but also translating that into the business stakeholder. And so at the end of the day, being able to tell the story around the data and then describe the business impact that it's had, or work with their peers, analysts, managers, strategists. Those are all different roles that they might work with in order to help make sense of their data and their models.
This is Ravi. Not too much else to add, other than the fact that I think different companies and different teams structure differently. Even for a large company like United, different teams within United Health Group also are structured differently. Some might be structured like the way John's suggesting, and some are structured like the way Lizzy is suggesting. The one thing to at least realize, and at least I've realized over the course of my career, is that there tends to be a huge need for explainability, because there's a tendency to kind of black box your way out of the problem. Just throw the kitchen sink at it and then just say, hey, it's the model. I don't know what it's doing. I use this awesome package, and it's supposed to just work. And I think that's seldom enough, um, because especially if you're talking about, let's say, starting a new product line, or investing money, or taking on a certain particular initiative, you need to know why you are making those decisions. So I think explainability is important, and I think underpinning of that is having a core understanding of methodology, because I think without methodology, big data means big garbage generally. So that without methodology, it's still a black box garbage output.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I would just add, like, with the explainability piece, all the roles I described maybe give you some technical foundation, but you really have to have that mindset of, like, how do you understand what the problem is, and then being able to explain it. And then, I think part of being able to explain is, like Ravi said, with the methodology. So totally agree there.
And that's a great transition point into this next question, is that data science is not a silo. Oftentimes you have to work with teams. So can you guys talk a little bit about how data scientists interact with other people on teams and what they need to be successful on those teams?
Yeah, I can start. From a marketer's perspective, we're typically working from a more modern or agile operating model. And so in more sophisticated organizations, you might see the data scientist working alongside a data engineer, a data steward, data strategists from an analytics perspective, but then they're also working according to kind of the needs of the project. And so they might also be working alongside business stakeholders and representatives from IT, depending on the needs of the project, and then work up and down and flex their role according to those projects' needs. We're also seeing that as a senior data scientist, those who are more experienced, they might be tasked on those project-based teams to work alongside more junior level data scientists or even data analysts who want to upskill in order to teach their skills and have those others benefit from the opportunity to learn and grow in their careers. And I think we'll see that will increase, especially given resource constraints during the pandemic on a lot of organizations. I have a feeling we will see that organizations are embracing upskilling in this way. And we'll also see this increase as organizations get better about providing visibility into how data scientists can grow their careers and continue to advance, whether they choose to be in a management track or a subject matter expert track.
So I guess I can add on to that, or add some specific things related to work at General Mills. So a lot of the people that we have on my team are senior data scientists, and so they are kind of playing that consulting role. And oftentimes the projects that they're working on, data science is at the core of what they're trying to deliver. And so oftentimes that means they're kind of playing like the technical lead role, like what other roles are needed to see this to success. So they might be working with application developers to basically, like, how do we take this forecast and serve it up in a way that people can take action on. They might be working with BI reporting people. So again, how do people understand the explainability of this model? There might be working with, like, our data engineers to make sure that data sources get to places on time and in full. But then also they're going to be working with the business stakeholders to make sure that obviously that we're solving the problem that they actually set out to solve. So they are kind of playing that internal consultant role, all while trying to deliver like data science value add work. So it really is kind of like wear many hats while also doing the things that you are uniquely qualified to do.
Not much more to add. I think Lizzy and John covered it all.
Great, so let's move into the hiring portion of the program. So first and foremost, I'd love to hear about the types of positions that you guys are involved with as it relates to hiring, and what you think some of the most important characteristics for a successful data scientist are, whether those are hard or soft skills, and then if you guys have different opinions for more entry-level versus advanced positions.
Maybe I can lead on that one. I mean, I think, at least it depends on where you are in your career, right? And if you're starting off fresh, I think if you have a reasonably clean slate, you could go any which way you want. I think, however, what I generally would caution folks, is to not have this get rich quick mentality, in the sense that it is difficult. I don't think we should understand that we should, shy away from the topic, because there is a chance that you could do bad data science. There's a chance that you could do incorrect analysis. There's a reasonable risk, because there's a lot of things open to interpretation. So and there's a chance that the assumptions fail. So I think repeatability of the analysis is important. So I think, and if you don't understand fundamentals, there is, you can't just kitchen sink your way out of these problems, especially the tough ones. So I think, so it depends on where you are in your career path, but fundamentally, I think being a mile wide isn't always enough. You have to have some depth in certain areas, like we discussed. So I think folks need to figure out what they're interested in, which parts do they want to get depth in, maybe in the business side, maybe in the methodology side, maybe in the modeling side. I mean, maybe even, in the programming side, distributed computing, visualizations, could be any of these different areas, and maybe more than one generally. So I think, and it takes time to develop enough expertise, because generally once you develop that expertise, it's already redundant by the time you learn it. So that's the nature of the beast, especially in data science land. So I think, and that once you go in with that appreciation in mind, you can start realizing, okay, maybe these are my strengths. This is what I'm good at, but these are my weaknesses. Maybe I want to work on these. And I think that would be a good way to think through it, because I don't think the only thing that is constant is you got to be a learning machine. You just have to learn. It doesn't matter where you are on your career journey. You got to try to get as hands-on as you can. Doesn't matter how far up you rise, because most data science teams, you won't have 500 data scientists that you're going to manage. You can have a few folks that are going to be able to spread across the board and manage a lot of things. So you'll need to be able to advise and guide them. And if you're not hands-on, it'll be difficult to do that, even if you rise up the ranks. So that's the one thing I would suggest, that it should always be hands-on, it should always be learning, and you should always have an appreciation of the fact of what you don't know, and be transparent about it as much as you can, so that you can go back and learn that.
So I can talk a little bit about some of the positions that I'm involved with hiring. So obviously data science positions, analytic engineers, analytic architects. So I talked a little bit about the analytic engineers, but analytic architects are basically the people who are around how do we support the tooling, the systems, the infrastructure that we need to do that type of work. So those are some of the things there. But then to build off of what Ravi was saying, really the soft skills that we're looking for, it seems like the market is pretty well versed with, at least from my standpoint, of the people that we get that are applying, seem to have a lot of the technical skills. But where we seem to fall short on is that realizing that data science isn't something that you do like in a back room and then come back after 6 months and report, here's my results, go take it and change the world with it. It really is an iterative process that you're interacting directly with the business. And so it really requires a lot of organization. It requires a lot of business communication back and forth. So just realizing that, again, it's not just about the technical skills. So you do need to continuously learn, as Ravi said, but realizing that, you know, at least at my organization, it's not a, you know, I'm going to go work on this stuff all by myself and not talk to anyone. It's really, you have to leverage your other data scientists, you have to leverage your business partners to get a solution out there.
I would add one more thing. If you're looking for, so as a practitioner, when I was hiring for my teams, I think one of the biggest challenges was, you know, trying to figure out how people would perform in their careers based on, you know, the hour-long interview we might have together. And so, you know, if you're looking for either ways to examine some of those competencies, there's a great book by a data visualization expert called Lizzy Foo. And in it, he outlines, I think it's 13 traits of a fantastic, you know, data analyst, or I think is what he looked at. But I think, you know, it's probably something that applies to data scientists too. And about 11 of those are actually what we would call competencies, or some of those softer skills. And it's things like, you know, curiosity. And everybody always says, well, how do I assess curiosity in that hour-long interview? And I think it's worth looking at, you know, behavioral interview questions, for instance, as a way to prepare for some of these roles, looking at what's the challenge, the action, and the result that you'd pursued in different settings. And that'll help people, not only you prepare for an interview, but also identify some of that talent and maybe forecast how it'll perform later on.
Great, thank you. And a couple of you guys started to transition to the next question I have, which is about realistic expectations. So what are some expectations other than you probably don't want to focus on getting rich quick, right? That Ravi mentioned, but are there any other tips that you guys have on where data scientists should set their expectations for a new job?
So if you are a data scientist, let's assume that you graduated from university with a bachelor's in data science or master's in data science, whatever it may be. The question that I would ask myself is, why would a company hire me over somebody who has, let's say, a master's in computer science or a master's in mathematics or a master's in statistics? Because 4 years of, or let's say a couple of years of master's on data science, you'll probably have sampled a few things, versus a couple of years in computer science, you've probably gone in depth on a few things. And versus in statistics, you might have gone depth in something else. So math, or it doesn't matter, arts, pick whatever. Right? I mean, so whatever your specialization might be, you might have gone deep on the certain things. Now, unless I can show that I have not just sampled things, across the spectrum of learning, but I have done enough outside of my curriculum, outside of academia, where maybe I've gone and participated in competitions. Maybe I've actually gone on Stack Overflow and developed my skill set. I mean, there are other things that I think generalist courses or students coming out of generalist courses need to be able to demonstrate, rather than simply saying I graduated out of this particular program. And I think that becomes more and more important for these disciplines that cross-cut across different areas, because like Lizzy said, it's not very easy to ascertain curiosity in an interview. However, you could demonstrate that you were curious by showing, okay, here's my Stack Overflow ranking. Here's what I did on Kaggle. Here's generally how I have participated in these many case competition. Here's the papers I have written, and or even come up with a unique interpretation of a paper that nobody might have interpreted that way. So I mean, there's so many things that you could do now, and I think what happens is, in my view, it's important for these generalistic disciplines or generalistic degrees, if you will, to be able to, it's a good thing that you have a generalistic degree, you sample things, but you need to be able to show specific stuff that you went above and beyond, because I think you could learn a lot of what gets taught in university in a master's in data science degree by just sampling good YouTube videos and then doing a little bit on your own. And I would argue, why would somebody who has watched these YouTube videos and done something on their own, why is that person not as equally capable as somebody that let's say has the credentials to back?
I think you make a great point. I think universities often teach their programs to the average, and that means that there's a ton of other people that are coming out of these same programs. They're going to have the same skill sets, the same knowledge as you. How do you really differentially stand out from all these people? And so you've described some different ways that you can do that. I think trying to get involved with, like, I have a passion towards trying to get involved in like local related information. Like, how can you serve up data differently for your local community or for nonprofits or things like that. I think another thing to think about, just to get back to the original question in a different way, is like, what's a different expectation I would have is, as you're working with stuff, oftentimes in school, you're always going to get like a positive result. You're going to be able to forecast it. You're going to be able to classify or cluster, because that's the whole exercise that's been given to you. In the real world, in real life, you're going to oftentimes find that your analysis might not prove out that there's any meaningful pattern in the data. There might be something to pursue, and you need to be prepared to be able to articulate, here are the things we've tried, here's why we think that this isn't worth spending more time on. I feel like a lot of programs always focus on, like, you're going to do machine learning and you're going to be able to like solve cancer and world hunger by just applying these 3 algorithms. And in real life, it's like you apply 3 algorithms and you're like, wow, I think Ravi, you were saying, like, in one of our other conversations, like, if there's like your thing is only 90% accurate, but you have like 99% chance of actually not having this disease, then your thing's actually worse than just by pure chance. So just realizing that, you're not going to be able to solve every problem, and that's okay, but you need to be able to articulate what you've tried and what process did you take to really show that you gave it enough rigor, you gave it enough thought before saying, okay, we're going to put this aside and work on something else.
Yeah, I mean, and also
we often say in marketing that a lack of insight isn't, if you find out or disprove your hypothesis, right, it doesn't mean that it was all for naught. But I think much like you're saying, Don, like the real value comes from communicating about it. Like, what do we do differently? What do we do next? And being able to, I think that when we see data scientists, or when I saw data scientists who functioned on another level, those that did were the ones that were able to be prescriptive about what we were going to do about it.
Right, and a lot of, completely agree, and a lot of pragmatism too. I mean, you've got, generally, understand that it's you're going to encounter more failures than successes. I mean, and sometimes there might not be an answer there, because you just don't have good enough data, or whatever the reason might be. You might not understand the process that is generating the data, or certain covariates might be so hidden that you can't even understand. They might be just so latent. I mean, you just don't know in many cases. So the last thing you want to do is to say that I've put 4 months into solving this problem and I've XG boosted my way out of this. But now, after 4 months of putting, I want to conclude something. And I think the tendency, that confirmation bias can be as I think data science as it stands today, with so much data, I think that there's a huge problem on confirming what you kind of set out to, because you can twist and torture the data as much as you want, and try to tell your stories. I think that risk and that pragmatism, that okay, I've learned something out of this, irrespective of what the outcome is important to go back with, because there's a learning in every failure, a lot of learning in every failure, I would argue.
Yeah, I would say along the same lines of like always learning, like you're going to need to make sure that you're learning all about whatever new tools and algorithms are out there, because tools and algorithms are always going to be changing. There's always going to be different things to learn there. But I think when you come into the field, realize, like, just because you have a master's degree in data science or a master's degree in computer science or statistics or whatever it is, you're likely not going to have the business domain to really make monumental changes. Like, people oftentimes have been working on these things for quite a long time. they're going to look for you to add value in specific ways by applying your specific knowledge. But you're going to have to lean on them to be really partners to make sure that you understand, like, what are the pain points, what have they tried in the past, to make sure that you're not just like redoing something that they've already tried, 10 other times before. So just making sure that you pause before you try to change everything to understand what has been done. Why are we doing things the way that we're doing it now? And then make like an educated recommendation after you've understood that, before just saying like, this is dumb, why haven't we done forecasting in this? Like, we should do XYZ. It's like, well, maybe we have tried that, and a previous data scientist found out that there was no pattern, there was no ability to forecast it. So what reasonable things do you think is going to be different this time?
So in talking about all of this great experience, Lizzy has a great question that came up. So take it away, Lizzy.
Yeah, last week when we were on our prep call, we were talking about ways for data scientists to showcase their skills, right? And not only more senior level, but also some of these junior level data scientists that might be coming out of educational programs and so forth. And much like marketing and advertising, we've long relied on creative portfolios for artists, copywriters to showcase their work. One recommendation I might have is to create your own creative portfolio, or your data analysis portfolio, if you will, that features some of the examples of the output of your work. Whether that's, we think one of the examples that Ravi and John had mentioned was putting code on GitHub, and not only showing how you might work off of an existing code, but maybe work on your own, could be a great opportunity. And then also talking about, if you've created data visualizations, talking about the impact that those have had, what's made them strong, how have you talked about the impact of that with your business peers, your business colleagues, and really showing the output of some of those exercises.
And that makes so much sense, because I think a resume, you can, you're going to tailor the resume generally to fit the interview or fit the job profile. I mean, so there's a little bit of, that's also a marketing tool, a resume. So generally interviewers come a little, skeptical about, okay, this is a resume, it tells me a little bit about you, but I want to know more. And that's why you're having the interview process. So I think things that were done externally, outside of the resume, like that, an analytic portfolio, if you will, that tells me that this candidate, this person was pressure tested, has been pressure tested, because the open source community, the Stack Overflow community, they are not going to play nice. If you ask a question, for example, simple thing, like if you ask a question that has already been answered, you're going to get downvoted. It'll just show that you didn't bother enough to do enough research. So it's hard to accumulate points. Let's say if you go to Stack Overflow and try to accumulate, let's say 1,000 points, it takes incredible amount of effort. But that also puts the rigor back on you to kind of learn and to be able to add value to the community, to further the knowledge over there. So, and the fact that somebody comes in and say, okay, I was ranked in the top 5% in 2020 in Stack Overflow. Well, that tells me, okay, you could not have just winged it. You could not have, there's a little bit of pressure testing from a global community. It's not even like a local community. So you got globally pressure tested, and you were able to add value to questions that people had across the world. That means you were the repository of knowledge, or you at least did the work on, adding to that. So that is useful. Kaggle competitions are good. So I think if you can tell us that, okay, that you can compete and you can further the conversation in diverse situations, and that means that, okay, well, all right, you have taken what you learned academically and applied into real world situations, because the problems that these communities are facing are real world. They are not in many cases hypothetical. So I think that just flips the conversation on its head, and then you can start talking about, okay, then the conversation can quickly shift to, okay, I get what your credentials are, I get what you have done, I know that you can learn, and then now let's start talking about what this particular job entails and how you could contribute to this.
So I have an angry response on resumes. Like, it really pisses me off when universities do these resume like like, I don't know, tuning sessions or whatever, and I get like 50 resumes that are all cookie cutters. Like, it drives me absolutely bonkers because it makes it impossible for me to really sort through the good candidates from the bad candidates. I think like, I've especially seen it pretty egregiously done here in the local community, you know, from, you know, schools that I've gone to. So I went to the University of Minnesota, so I've seen it from there. I've seen it from St. Thomas. I've seen it from other universities as well. But it really drives me nuts because you get 50 resumes that are almost identical, all worked on the same class projects. They've all taken the same classes, but I do a phone screen. One candidate's great. Then the next one I have, it's like they don't last 10 minutes through that phone call. Like, I'm like, sorry, this isn't going to work. So building out that portfolio, and then not only that, like customizing your resume to really speak to your specific strengths is going to be really important. With that portfolio, you know, as we were talking about, like putting stuff on GitHub, I think too many people focus on, here is like my cool analysis, like results. Cool, I got 97%. The thing is that like 97% might be great for like, I don't know, language classification or telling whether, you know, something is a cat or a dog. It's probably not great, you know, if you're telling me whether the airplane. So like, make sure that you give people context to like the metrics that you're using as you're trying to explain, you know, what actions should be taken from these portfolio items. Make sure you explain the whole process. Don't just focus on, here's the end result. Showcase, here's the analysis I did. Here's the level of depth I went into before getting there. Because I think too many people just focus on, here's my outcome. Cool, I threw everything but the kitchen sink at it. Or maybe I even threw the kitchen sink at it and I got this great result, but I have no way of explaining, how did I get there? What did I try? What is the value of this metric? What action should I take after this? So now I'm channeling my my inner angry hiring manager, you know, chi here. So that's just my point where I'm getting real frustrated with that.
That's making me smile because it reminded me of a professor that I had at MIT, and he was teaching a course. He founded Bethesda Softworks, right, the video gaming company, and he was teaching a course in video game design and development, and part of it that we had to do was learn the side of the business too. And one example he'd come in with one day is how he was sitting in this pitch competition for the media lab, and a group of students came up with you know, sensors that you could put in shoes, which would show your location in a 3-dimensional space, and then they could graph that. And, you know, at the end of the day, after the presentation, you know, you asked him, right, well, that's cool, but what are you going to do with it? And they didn't know. And that stuck with me my whole career. Obviously, it's that question of, you can make the coolest stuff, but if you don't have a way to show people what the impact of it is and what you're going to do about it, you know, at the end of the day, it's not useful. It could be the
What's
best
the point?
invention in the world. If it's not useful, it's
Wasted
not useful.
effort, right?
Yes.
So this is a great start to a conversation on resumes and interviewing. So maybe you guys could talk a little bit about how candidates can stand out. And you have mentioned some of the extracurricular activities they can do, but what else makes a great resume? And then conversely, what are the fatal flaws, other ones besides the few that John has mentioned already?
So I'm
ready.
all like hot and bothered right now, so I can just get going on this. So I think too many people focus just on the technology. Like, technology is great, but honestly, it changes really quickly. So you know, focus more on kind of like what kinds of things you're learning. So, you know, don't just focus on like, hey, I know a Python or I know R, but talk more about like, what are the skills that you're learning? Are you learning how to data wrangle? Are you learning how to do analysis? Things like that. But I think too many people also just focus too much on the technology side. So I think, you know, what other career opportunities did you have along the way? Maybe you were a residence hall advisor, and being able to do conflict mediation or something like that. That's a really valuable soft skill that I think would be really great. I'd love to talk to you about that. Like, I see a ton of people that all have Python R. You made it past that filter. Great. Let's talk about what makes you different. Maybe you had an international experience. General Mills is an international company. tell me about your experience that you've had, working overseas. How did that change your worldview of things? How did that help you understand that different people can look at the same thing differently? I want to see things like that in a resume, and I want to see those things brought up during during an interview versus just like, here's my dump of projects that every other student has done. Here's my dump of technologies that I've spent 15 minutes doing hello world in. I want to talk about like, what did you actually do?
Channel Nassim Taleb, you'd say it's easier to macro BS than micro BS. I'm looking for the macro BSers because specificity I think is important. You got to be specific because that's when you realize who's just talking the talk and who can walk the walk. Because and so that's why I think hands-on interviews and anybody will say I know R and Python. I mean, I just read this book or what that took that course, whatever. It doesn't really matter. I mean, I would say don't get too fixated on programming languages. The programming COBOL was an awesome thing many years ago. So now these the new frameworks will keep coming up, and that's not necessarily it's important, but I would rather care more about, okay, you are an awesome Python programmer, you're the best there is. I'm interested whether you can learn another one that has got nothing to do with Python, that doesn't even have the same syntax as Python, doesn't even work that same way. That's what I would be interested in. I think showing that you can unlearn something, or maybe take the learnings from there. I don't know if there's such a thing as unlearning, but we can take the learnings from there and apply it somewhere else. I think that's what I would be interested in, and get specific. Get very specific and give examples of why your resume or you should stand out from the other person that is presumably saying the exact same things you are. So I think that would help, because I think it's more about help the interviewer understand this. It doesn't need to be kind of it doesn't need to come from a place of mistrust or distrust or anything. Just help, because who doesn't want to hire the best candidates? In my view, talent is incredibly rare. I mean, why we should want the best data scientists? Every company should want to hire the best data scientists. So, I mean, John has people on his team, and then I want all of them on my team. So
maybe even low quality data scientists might be dangerous.
Right.
That's the flip side of it too.
So I mean so I think given that talent is good talent that is very rare, and if you believe that you are that good talent, you should try a level best to make it easier for the interviewer to figure that part out, and don't make it too cryptic. Don't make it too suggestive, and just speak honestly and sincerely in details. I think that'll just make everything easier, I suppose.
Yeah, I think like with the macro BSers, like I think what drives me nuts, or like what will instantly fail someone out of an interview, is if you say something like, don't try to fake it. Like, data science is a huge domain. It's okay not to know, and to kind of be like, I don't have that much experience with time series forecasting. I do have experience in this and this and this, but that's not a domain that I currently have experience with. If you tell me that you have experience in this and like you trip up because like you're faking it, like it's going to be like either this guy or this guy or gal is like totally totally doesn't know what they're talking about, like they're an idiot, like, and they're just like that they're doing the process wrong, or they're trying to tell me that they have done this when they clearly haven't. So just be honest and be like, data science is a huge domain. I haven't had experience to computer vision or whatever it may be. I think that's entirely fine, because I think it's a lot easier for me in an interview to go, okay, this person hits, all these other criteria perfectly. They don't have experience with this, but they're honest about that. They realize where their weaknesses are. Maybe I can take a chance on training them up in that because they meet all these other criteria, versus this person's full of it. They think that they know everything and that they aren't even aware of like how far away they are from it. So just something I would add on that point.
I love that point of being really straightforward, and inevitably in every interview you get the question of what are some growth areas or what is a weakness. So I think that that's maybe a great opportunity.
And that's probably a time to not say I have none. Because probably the interviewer has so many that if they were to rattle them off, I think it'll not end. So I think everybody has, I think that the thing that I'm looking for is when somebody could articulate what weakness. I'm not looking for the fact that they have weaknesses. I mean, I take it for granted that everybody has weaknesses. I'm looking for an ability to self-reflect. I'm looking for an honest assessment of yourself, where that way I know that you can learn. You can learn with little guidance or no guidance, and then you're going to adapt and improve. I think, and that's going to be the name of the game. So I think it's not so much that that you're going to get penalized by saying your weaknesses. I think it's more about articulate what your weaknesses are and tell me why you believe they are your weaknesses. And even if you've done nothing about them, that's fine. You've done nothing to improve any weaknesses. It's totally cool, but why do you believe they are weaknesses? That means these are, there should be some depth of thought as to why that is the way it is, right?
A build there, we've talked a lot about interviews, but we haven't really talked a lot about how to get the interview. And when I was hiring and staffing teams, especially straight out of school with folks who were straight out of school and programs, I would almost look at the resume as sort of okay, it's like your exhaustive list of skills, but then there's the importance of the cover letter and describing, what have you done? What's the interest that you have in the job that I have available? And how are you going to describe how your unique skill sets really fit that role? And give me a lens into who you actually are as a person, because even if you're not the best at talking about your competencies or the best at answering interview questions, or in a lot of cases your interviewer isn't that great at actually doing the interview, you can still use that cover letter as an opportunity to translate your skills, your competencies, and your uniqueness into the specific role at hand.
So just full disclosure, after HR sends me resumes, after it passes through their filter calculator, I never see cover letters. So that's just my counterpoint to that. I've never seen a cover letter as I'm trying to hire. So just keep that in mind.
I think the point, though, that Lizzy brings up is a great one in terms of preparation and knowing how you fit in that role. So maybe you guys could talk a little bit about the importance of doing your homework and what kind of preparation candidates should be engaging in.
Yeah, make sure you know what the company does. I feel like the talent curve that's out there. So if I'm a data scientist and I'm thinking of the distribution of talent, and you've got on the x-axis kind of their skill level. So the closer you are to the y-axis, the lower skill you have, and the further out on that x-axis, the more talented you are. And then on the other side, it's how many people you have. Well, right now it's this huge hump of early career data scientists that are all being self-taught, coming out of data science programs, things like that. I feel like I don't necessarily blame them, because I think it's hard as an early career data scientist to get into the job market. You got this catch-22 of can't get experience without a job, can't get a job without experience. But I feel like too many of them just throw their resume out there, and then when they finally get a phone interview, they don't even understand what your company does. And it's okay, yeah, General Mills makes cereal, but that doesn't mean the data scientists are filling boxes of Cheerios every day. We do a lot of other things. So there's marketing, there's supply chain, there's finance. Understand that, what is the domain of the position that you might be working in? Because I feel like that's a really big fatal flaw. Is if you come in and you're I want to do, search engine recommendation. It's well, General Mills doesn't really do that, or that's a very niche area within General Mills, and we already have one person doing that. So I think just being honest about what does the company do and how might your role fit into that.
I think the other thing I'd look for is, I'd be wary of as a hiring manager, I've gone both ways, right? When I've created a job requisition, I've made the mistake of being too general because I wanted to cast a wide net and see what I could get. And I've made the mistake of over specifying my job description so that, a field of 22,000 potential candidates suddenly becomes a field of 100, of which 11 of the people in that field, that group might be looking for an open position at any given time. And so my advice to folks who are looking for roles and trying to fit their expertise to those roles would be to, read between the lines a bit. When you look for the roles that are going to be the best fit, really think about how those requisitions are written and whether that hiring manager might be trying to go either way on those extremes.
And the other thing to at least consider is that, I mean, this field is moving so fast that it's hard for anybody to generally keep up, right? So imagine um, for whatever reason, it doesn't turn out to be a good match between the candidate and the employer, but you get hired. And now you spend, let's say, a year and a half figuring your way out through this and then trying to make it work. Um, and you didn't, and you don't take any learnings out of that are transferable with you. All you learned was specific to that company, that is localized to that company, but there were no general purpose skills that you could take to another role, right? I mean, so that's a year and a half that you lost. It's a year and a half that you lost that you could have probably done or used building skills that could stay with you. So I think it's important to understand that okay, you are in an industry, you're in the data business. It's an industry that is churning through concepts and ideas faster than anything. And a year and a half of time and energy lost might not be something you can afford if you are early stage in your career or even any later in your career. So I think it's important to understand, okay, you might be the best person doing search engine optimization, and that's what you're passionate about. So maybe look for those roles, because if you spend a year and a half doing something else, the search engine optimization, the search engine, the information extraction world has moved on from where you left it off a year and a half ago. So I think that's an important thing to understand is that you've got to be able to learn enough out of it, and those are the best kind of jobs to take where you get enough and your employer gets enough, and that's how it works, because that's where I think most employees will put in the discretionary effort.
Yeah, I think you need to I think too many people go to interviews being the interviewee the whole time. And I think at least what's worked really well for me in my career is being upfront and saying, like, I'm a data scientist, like, I'm also interviewing your company. Like, what is your company going to provide me? Obviously, besides money and vacation and all those fun things, but like, what opportunities are there for me? Like, again, it's super important that I don't get stuck in a role that's going to, waste my time. So I want to understand, like, what are the things that I'm going to be challenged to do? What is the company going to do to ensure that I have the training and ability to advance my career and my abilities?
And I think that also tells your employer that you are serious about this, that you're not just winging it, right? And also you care enough about your personal growth, and then you're willing to go that extra mile. So I think it shows a lot of maturity in how you approach these conversations. Because it cannot be a one-way street. Nothing can generally be a one-way street and be successful long term. So, and you want to if you put in your sweat equity for a few years, you could rise up the ranks in that company. Why does it always need to be, I want to switch jobs? It doesn't need to be switch jobs. I mean, large companies will probably have enough roles across, within the, like, General Mills, Reuters, I mean, the large companies. So there are enough roles within the company where you can learn different sides of the businesses too, and then still have enough newness going around. So I think that that's something to consider. I don't think very few, you can't just make it a transactional thing.
All right, we're getting pretty close on time. So I'm gonna ask you a couple of questions, and let's do a lightning round. So a couple of words in response. So the first question is, if you could yell at colleges for one thing, what would it be?
Cookie cutter resumes.
Not connecting insight to business outcomes.
Too many generalists.
Love it. So what is one thing students could do to differentiate themselves?
Focus on what actually makes them different. What other experiences do they have? What other extracurriculars or projects can they do outside of work? Just literally look at your classmates. You have group projects with them. What makes you different? Focus on those.
I focus on curiosity. Why do you want the job that I have available? And show me. And if you're not really into it, there's a lot of other jobs out there for you.
I mean, develop a core competence. Develop maybe more than one core competence, and dedicate enough time and energy doing it and exhibit that, show that.
Love it. Thanks, guys. So we have one final viewer question, and then we'll wrap things up with final thoughts. So the question is, when you're hiring multiple positions on one team, do you look for different characteristics in those team members? So the example is, do you look for a Steve Jobs to go with your Wozniak?
For sure. I think any team, given that there's no right, we don't even know what the right answers here are. Absolutely. I mean, I think it'd be stupid not to. I think you absolutely need to have, I would say that's a requirement, that's an essential thing to have for to have well-rounded teams, because you can pressure test each other's ideas. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, not everyone is going to want or be a great leader in an area. So, you gotta make sure that you balance that out, because you can't just have, 10 people that all want to lead a project, because some, like we have to figure out like how we're going to do this stuff. On the flip side, we can't have 10 people that only do the modeling. So it's like, as you're hiring people, we're obviously looking for people who have a blend of that, but it might be this person leans heavier on one side and this person leans heavier on the other side. Great, they can work together to deliver a really solid project, versus having the whole team lean one way and then now you've got like team issues, you've got a big gap on the other side.
I'll add to that from an academic standpoint that all the research is showing that the more diverse your teams are, the more creative they are, which is pretty cool. So with the remaining 4 minutes, I'd love to give you guys an opportunity for about a minute and a half response on any final thoughts you have on this topic. Angry hiring managers.
I mean, I think it's really an exciting time, for students, not for anybody generally, whether you are a data science graduating from a program or not. Computer science doesn't really matter. I think it's accessible to everybody. Computing is easy, cheap. There's so much information there. In fact, I think the harder part now is to figure out what is the good information where, because you could go through hours and hours to find that 20-minute nugget, that was worth your time. So I think, having that curiosity, the amount of information and knowledge that is accessible, I think if this was there when I was studying, doing my master's, couple of masters, I mean, it would have been a completely different world. So I think, I mean, this is the best time to come out of any data science programs or get into analytics, get into the data business. But just realize that it's a fast-paced environment. So you got to keep up with it. So the good and the bad.
My last piece of advice is to find a good mentor and thank them.
That's a really good one, but makes it hard for me to follow up on. I would say, make sure that, as other people have mentioned, that you're not in it just for, the paycheck, that you're really in it because you want to solve problems, you're curious about it. You have developed kind of a good, what we call like number sense, which is you understand when the data smells funny and you should dig into it a little bit more. And then just, make sure that, again, like that curiosity to solve the problems is really there. Don't just focus on data science is the hottest job of the 21st century. Realize that there are a lot of other data related jobs that don't get talked about as much. So a big shout out to, like our data engineering teams, our analytic architects, just from the standpoint of no one talks about those careers, but those are really exciting ones that are there too, that you know, I think we could definitely use some more great people there.
And then because we have 2 minutes, let's do one more quick lightning question. A lot of students always wonder if they should get a master's degree. So the question for a one-word answer is, what do you guys value more, degrees or experience?
Can't hurt to have both.
Yeah, I would say I'd like to see experience before you do a master's, so that I know that you are actually committed towards the domain area that you're getting a master's in, that you're not just doing it because it's what someone told you to do.
And like any good degree, I think if you're pursuing a master's, you should have a goal for how it is going to situate itself in your career. Is it going to give you knowledge and skills you don't have? Then great. If it's something where maybe you can acquire those skills or knowledge on the job, it's a hard trade-off, and it's a hard question to answer in one word as a lightning round.
I love it. I love those responses. You guys have provided some really great advice today. So we can't thank you enough. If you guys have any questions, please reach out to Mini Analytics. If we weren't able to answer your question today, we'll make sure that we get it answered. Tune in for next week, Mini Analytics Monday, and we'll see you then. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, folks. Good to be with you all.
Bye, y'all.
See ya.